The Default King Air C90, an aircraft we all have at our disposal. I've been spending some time with the C90 lately, and there's been a couple of things that I've noticed making it a little difficult to transition from other more complex or simpler airplanes. Stay tuned for Quirks of the King Air. Odds are if you're transitioning to the King Air, it has not been without some surprises. Basic functions in other aircraft may appear to be absent and forgotten. I've compiled a short list that I hope helps. Located between the seats, the EFIS control panel and Autopilot tend to be the center of this video's discussion. We'll look briefly at each segment before running down what I've called the King Air Quirks. The top left is our EFIS control panel, which does as the name implies, controls what we see on the PFD and HSI. Below are two autopilot mode panels. This is where your basic autopilot functions are manipulated. Behind our logo, barely in view, is the flight director switch, which I did not highlight in this video. Moving to the right half, we see the EFIS power switch, and below that, an LEV trim switch. Finally, in the bottom right, in red, the cabin pressurization knob. The cabin cruise altitude is represented on the inner ring of numbers, with the larger outer numbers the cabin altitude. Highlighted in green is the adjustment knob. I attempted to organize these first few that we're going to talk about in almost an order of importance. In our current state, the battery power is on, and we're going to go down here to flip on our EFIS power switch. As we do so, and then we look back up, we'll see that the EFIS system has not energized. So I'll go ahead and turn that back off. And the reason it didn't energize is we don't have our master avionics switch on. In order for the EFIS to come on, the avionics master has to be on first. And now as we look back up, that is completed. So if you find that not powering on, make sure you have both battery power and avionics master power switch enabled. After the EFIS power on, we're now going to join the aircraft on takeoff roll. Elevator trim is extremely important on takeoff and throughout our climb, and actually most phases of flight. The Laminar checklist included with the aircraft says to trim for 5 degrees nose up. However, it does not say to turn the power switch on. As we go through our climb out here, we'll try and trim for a speed around 105 to 107 knots, which is best rate of climb for most weights in this aircraft. Now I'm trimming the aircraft with the buttons configured on my joystick. And as I trim, I'll release pressure, and the nose drops. And the reason it's not responding is we didn't turn on our elevator trim switch located down here. So if you find that your trim is not responding, check that switch. Odds are that is going to be it. Both myself and the other flight brother discovered this, and of course after we figured it out, it became a lot more fun to fly. So here we're pointed at the ground, and we're trying to roll it back up carefully without overstressing the airframe. And then once we get it kind of to a positive climb attitude and can neutralize the control forces, then we start to trim back away and resume our flight. Now that we've been able to trim the aircraft, we're going to move to the Autopilot, located again beneath the seat on the left side. We're going to have our Autopilot engage, and our yaw damp will be in the second row. We'll go ahead and engage the Autopilot now. It's immediately to the left of the larger knob here as we zoom in. And then you can see the next to the Autopilot engage, the next button to the left there is your yaw damper. You may want to make sure your rudder boost switch is also on, which is next to our elevator switch as seen in the previous clip. So here I'm fighting a little bit with the aircraft, trying to get it stabilized. I accidentally hit the trim switch, which causes our master warning there and the autopilot disconnect. And then I want to try, I'll re-engage the autopilot there, and then I'm trying to engage a heading in an altitude mode. Again, we'll hit the autopilot engage, make sure that you do that. And here we can see the aircraft rolling now to a heading mode, which on the HSI is your little magenta caret or box there. Then I'm having to readjust the altitude, and then I'll select altitude select. You can see we were at about 5,800, 5,900, and our altitude set was below that. So I'm not sure why that didn't engage, but adjusting it to a higher altitude allows it to engage and capture there. So we look back down, we have autopilot, yaw damp, and then we're in altitude and heading mode. We're centered there on our heading bug. And that is adjusted with the EFIS control knob. The outer ring there we're displaying is the ground speed. And if we go back to this knob again and click it again, and then the next position, that's actually your wind information. So you can see we have about 13 knots on the nose. And we'll click at a further one, that's TTG, which is best I can tell is time to go. So for whatever your next waypoint loaded in, that shows you your estimated time. And the final position is an elapsed time. I don't know how this calculates, and I don't use it. Most of the time when I fly, I use the wind because the ground speed and your time is displayed on your GPS anyway. We're going to remain on the EFIS control panel for a little longer here, and I've positioned the camera in such a way. This is one of the quirks of the King Air. The inner knob there, we were just in that outer knob which was giving us ground speed and wind, but the inner knob is our heading select. So I've spun the heading now to the right, and then you can see the aircraft making the course change. Kind of a high and to the left of the flight deck, or really low and to the right is two of the best positions I've found this. We'll spin it further, and then you can see we're going to try and reverse course about 180 degrees. We'll zoom in and take a look, and our magenta caret's down there around, is at about 280, 290. So that's one of the other oddities of this plane, is the way the autopilot's laid out. You really have to get a camera angle that works. I think I have this one configured for like keypad number 8. Gives me that broad angle view. Or if you have a key assigned to where you can adjust heading left and right, that may be a good workaround for it as well. Take one more quick look. The heading knob also has a push to sync. So if you depress that, the center of it has the little hand or finger symbol, it'll snap to your current assigned heading. For our vertical profiles, we have a vertical speed and indicated airspeed. So if you can set your feet per minute on here by using the up and down toggle switch just below us there, or the IAS mode for an airspeed hold. Next we'll go to the navigation source select. If we look on our lower EFIS panel, we'll see VOR1 on the HSI. So if you're flying your VORs or ILSs, that will work. However, a lot of us load our GPS flight plans in. Here's the course select knob. Now, this wasn't really intuitive for me, and I had to do some reading to find this. So if we press and hold it, and we zoom back in, we'll see it's now white and it has a box around it. But then if we do nothing, it goes back to a solid green. So we'll press and hold again, and then now we can click through VOR1, VOR2, and RNAV1. If we then go to RNAV1, we then click and hold one more time, and it'll select RNAV1. Now we've loaded that in, and it'll fly our flight plan now on our GPS. So that's a click and hold. Once we get the box, then single clicks to select, and then once we have the nav source we desire, click and hold again to confirm. We can also come over to our 530 here. As I fumble through with this one, I think we'll end up doing a direct to, and then we'll see the RNAV line snap to on our navigation source, and the aircraft will begin flying our desired route. We have our nav source selected, and we have direct to eye view in this case. Now we're going to move our viewpoint again. This is what I mentioned earlier, the awkward positioning to where we can see everything, and then I'll select nav. And then you can see the aircraft starts to make its bank over. We're going to pick up the GPS line to eye view on our RNAV, and we'll see the course line come in. Again, we're continuing to near it, and it slowly makes the right bank to pick up the course. And that is how we select and then get onto our GPS flight plan. Annunciator lights. The first we'll address is this reverse not ready. When the props are feathered in a feathered position, you'll get a reverse not ready, and it seems to be only tied to propeller 1. Propeller 2 doesn't give us that warning. One of the other points neglected from the Default King Air start sequence, it doesn't tell you to turn your ignition off after you start. So here we'll show at 12% N1 according to some references we've found, and as you can see there, that's for the King Air 300 and 350. The channel has a friend who is a A&P on 350 King Air, so he supplied that information for us. So then we're going to turn our I'm going to add fuel there at 12%, and then once we hit about 50% on our turbine, that would be the time to switch the ignition off. There's a sequence that you only run the igniters for about 30 seconds, and then after that they need I believe it's a 5-minute cool down period. But as I'd mentioned, that's excluded from the default guide. You can see here we're just running through the start procedure again, moving it to high idle, making sure everything's in the green. We'll bring it back to low idle and turn the starter switches back off. The auto ignition, you can use that for perhaps turbulence and rain, heavy rain. We weren't able to confirm that, but as you can see here, you'll get that ignition alarm there, or alert there, the green, the left ignition in this instance. So we'll turn that off, and that'll clear that from our glare shield. While we continue looking at our glare shield, we'll see that we have the battery charge up here illuminated. We couldn't figure out how that's wired in internally. We tried selecting the gen switch on and off. That gives us our left DC gen or right DC gen, but it didn't clear the battery charge light there, as you can see. So the only way to get rid of that is on the lower left to click the battery switch from on back to off. Again, we don't know how that's wired, but that's how you get rid of that. We also have the left fuel pressure and right fuel pressure on. We'll take a look at that now. It's not addressed in the default manual, as you can see there, but it is run from the fuel panel on our left side. So the easy fix for all that is just to ensure the boost pumps are on or in an automatic position. You can see there we've turned the boost pump on for the left side, and that annunciator's gone. The right one is still there. So we'll cycle those onto auto or on positions. And you can see those are gone. So the only one left is that battery charge switch, which we'll resolve here by turning the battery on-off switch to off. And there you go. Now we've cleared the glare shield. So hopefully this helps if you have some of those annunciator alerts. When consulting with our friend who is the A&P, he made a good observation for our cold and dark video. I guess the props are only started in feather if you have external ground equipment that you're starting it. If you do a battery start, the props would be in the forward high RPM condition. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Well, we'll kind of fast forward here. I want to get to a couple things. First off, that the transponder does not start on default. It's always in the off position. You'll notice if we move in here and look, everything is on with the exception of the transponder. So you'll need to turn that on every time. This is from a cold XPlane start, so we've just logged in. I don't know if you're in XPlane. Log out and then come back in if it still stays off on the transponder, but that is something I noticed with this, so we'll point that out. Especially if you guys fly online, you may want to know that ahead of time for VATSIM and having your transponder ready for your squawk. Another unique observation with the King Air is the bleed valves, typically overhead panel for the heavy stuff. The bleed valves are over here on the bottom right. If you turn those on and then select the cabin temperature mode to auto, obviously you hear the airflow pick up, and here's your temperature indicator. It'll come up to about 60 degrees. I have noticed that if you bring it like, 2 or 3 notches, like let's say here, this is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, around 19 to 20 C. So again, here's your bleed air valves. You'll need those, and this is replicated. So if you turn the temperatures up and down on, sorry, not the mode. Here, the cabin temperature increase, decrease. This cabin air temperature will move. We'll discuss once we're, actually, now's a good time. We'll go ahead and discuss this while we're here. So if you're flying from the first officer's side, the King Air is below 12,500 gross weight, so it does not require a type rating, and believe it is single pilot certified if you check out. But our nav source here for nav 1, 2, and then GPS, as you can see, so this will display here. This is how you do this if you are flying from the right hand seat and you want to see a separate VOR or a line for the ILS. That's how you would do it. And one final note as we're powered up here, I won't demonstrate this while we're airborne, but if you have your ILS tuned up correctly, and you'll see your ILS active here, it'll be displayed here on your HSI or your lower EFIS panel here. You're going to select the approach mode. So this is very common, just like any, for example in the Zebo, you have the VOR loc mode until you get near your glide slope, and then you'll select approach. So this will follow your ILS down. I didn't address that earlier when we were talking about the nav. I kind of forgot it, so I had it on a note here to refer back to it. So on final approach, as you're in there and you're capturing the localizer and glide slope, selecting approach mode will allow the King Air to capture it and follow that in. We hope you've enjoyed the second video featuring the Default King Air C90 on the channel. That's an aircraft that we all have at our disposal and in our library, so be sure to get out there, dust it off. Hopefully we've been able to show you a few quirks of the King Air and how to resolve it, and so you can get out there and really enjoy flying it. Again, a couple of the things that we really were annoyed by is that elevator trim switch and the trying to get it into LNAV to follow that GPS. Those were some frustrating situations. So hopefully we've helped you speed that process up and that you guys will enjoy flying it. So until next time, plan the flight and fly the plan. We'll see you on board again soon.